What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is Thursday, July 11th. Back here on another episode to talk some more NFL, and today we're going to have a lot of stories regarding a lot of new things, a lot of progressions, a lot of new outlooks on things. Starting off with Justin Jefferson, talking about Kirk Cousins and his two new quarterbacks, Sam Darnold and McCarthy, his outlook on how everything broke down with Kirk, and looking at his two new quarterbacks in Sam Darnold and McCarthy. Then also, similarly, Davante Adams, talking about the quarterback battle that is going to take place this year between Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. He gives his thoughts on how the quarterback competition is going so far and if he has a preference or not at that spot, as well as talking about second-year running back for the Jaguars, Tank Bigsby. Could he be the missing piece to unlock this Jaguars offense in 2024? Those topics and more coming up on today's show. Before I get started, though, I want to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments, please use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. By using that link, I'm able to see any question or comment you make in my chat box, read it out loud, and that way get your guys' thoughts out there on anything I say or on any of the topics. It's a massive help for this show and the network as well, so if you would, please use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. But with that being the case, we can move on and start with the first segment, that is Justin Jefferson and the quarterback situation with the Vikings. A lot of moving on. We moved on from Kirk Cousins, and now not only do we have his replacement, but we have two new quarterbacks coming in Sam Darnold and McCarthy. A lot has been made of it. A lot of people have talked about it, but everybody has mentioned something except Justin Jefferson, and I thought what he did say about Kirk moving on and then also moving on to two new quarterbacks was pretty interesting. So I decided to share that with you guys on today's show. First, starting off with Kirk Cousins, because that one was the one that really intrigued me, just because of how everything happened, how everything really broke down, and you have Justin Jefferson wanting to get paid, and then once you do pay him, you want to make sure you get the best out of him, right, and have a reliable quarterback there. And you would have hoped that was Kirk Cousins with how well they were doing, but he obviously moved down to Atlanta. And Justin Jefferson appeared on the Rich Eisen show recently to talk about everything that went down with his former quarterback. And he said, I just knew that everything wasn't the way he wanted it to be here, especially just with having to pay me and having to pay so many other different guys. I feel like he just wanted a new start, a new opportunity to start with Atlanta and a clean slate. I'm not mad at him at all for that. I'm grateful for what he has brought to me and the things that we have accomplished together, which was to be expected. There could have been some ill feelings there just because of how everything happened, but honestly, it's hard to be mad when you get paid and reset the wide receiver market. So Justin Jefferson has no ill feelings towards Kirk Cousins, and I think that, like I mentioned, was to be expected. Kirk, you can kind of sense that it was going that way, not just from Justin Jefferson's point of view, but I think from the outside looking in. We don't have that much access to it, but you could also see how the negotiations were ongoing. Nothing was really being done. No progressions were being made, and you could have anticipated more and more that this was going to be the case. I think Justin Jefferson understood that. He understands the business side of it, and fortunately for him, he got paid. Now he is the most important piece to this team. He was probably it before, but you could have made an argument with Kirk Cousins because he was the quarterback and he brought that experience and all his abilities to that team. But now it's really all on Justin Jefferson. And looking towards the future now, talking about a new quarterback and a new leader that could sort of step into that role left by Kirk Cousins, you bring in Sam Darnold off of the 49ers, and you draft McCarthy as well with the 10th overall selection in this year's draft. And already, it hasn't been declared as a quarterback battle because head coach Kevin O'Connell has given some hints out that Darnold will probably be the starter once the season starts. Again, nothing too surprising. It is sort of the protocol with all of this. You draft a first-round quarterback. You want to give him as much time as possible to get acclimated to everything, get used to everything. Just throwing him out there without any caution doesn't really do anybody any good. So you could have predicted that Darnold was going to start. And on that topic, on talking about Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson also said a lot of good things about Sam Darnold so far. He hasn't been there, obviously, through OTAs and all the other workouts, but so far he has interacted with him. He said his communication and connecting with everybody has really stood out to him up until this point. And that's what you get with being in the NFL. He has been in various locker rooms. He has been around a lot of different people. So Justin Jefferson was just the latest person to bring up that Sam Darnold, easy guy to connect to, communicate with, and he's done it already with a lot of people, not just on football, but things outside of football as well. That's also really important to just establish that connection with your quarterback. So smooth transition so far with Sam Darnold there. More of that chemistry will begin to build once they get into training camp. That'll start on July 27th on a Saturday. So we're just counting down the days to that. And that's going to be an intriguing one because, like I said, I don't think it's a quarterback competition right now. It hasn't been deemed as one, but I am hoping personally that JJ sort of makes it that, and makes it really hard for the Vikings to not have to start him. I'm hoping for that just because I am a fan of JJ, and I really think he is a lot better than people give him credit for. So right now it's looking a little bit like Sam Darnold's job, but who knows in training camp with what could happen, and once the pads do come on, it'll be very interesting to see. But on that topic of JJ, Justin Jefferson also had some comments to make about him and just the development of it, how he's viewed him so far. He said, as you can see there on the screen, he said, "They want me to be that guy that JJ can always talk to and ask questions. He's definitely that type of kid. He definitely wants to ask questions, and he wants to learn how to become a problem in this league." I highlighted that last part because I think that says a lot. I think that really speaks a lot to me, and how, like I mentioned, I don't think JJ's the type of quarterback to just be content with being on the sidelines and being okay with a slow progression. He seems like the kind of guy that wants to be proactive, learn the playbook ahead of time, and really make this into a competition. And it seems like Justin Jefferson has already picked up on that. He wants to be a learner. He wants to ask questions. He wants to be ahead of schedule so he could be out there and playing rather than sitting on the bench. And again, I think a lot of that has to be credited to Jim Harbaugh, and already coming from a similar NFL-like system in college. It's a huge benefit for J.J. McCarthy, and not only that, they actually put JJ's locker next to Justin Jefferson. So obviously that was on purpose. Obviously to establish that connection more personally off of the field rather than on the field, because JJ's not a starter yet. To have Justin Jefferson right next to him, picking his brain, I think, again, that's also super fascinating, because you usually see that with the veteran quarterback and the rookie quarterback probably next to each other. So I think it just shows how high of a regard the Vikings hold JJ as well, to put him right next to Justin, establishing that connection already between the both of them. And Jefferson, I think he also can kind of tell that, as he says it in his statement, that JJ is working his way up to being that guy, just off of the success he has. That's the most important thing to me with JJ, compared to other quarterbacks as well, just dealing with the pressures, the high success that you had in college, bringing that over to the NFL. I believe that, again, gives him another advantage over some other quarterbacks, and I think Justin Jefferson can sense that a little bit here with JJ. It's still early on in the process, but he's already picking up a few things from JJ that I think are encouraging for Minnesota Vikings fans, for Justin Jefferson as well. Getting a read on both of these quarterbacks now that he will be catching passes from is going to be super important if they want to have a successful season this year. And to close it out, Justin Jefferson mentioned how it's pretty much his mindset from transitioning from Kirk, a very experienced veteran, to two guys that are pretty new to starting, honestly, or at least having success starting, because Sam has been a starter, but he hasn't really been faced with too many prosperous situations like he finds himself in now. With the Jets, it wasn't really like that. The Panthers, much less. The 49ers, a lot of talent around, but he never played. So now it's really his one opportunity, or I should say the first opportunity to be around this much talent and really just go out there and take advantage of it. Same goes for JJ, because you have that success in college. You have a lot of great players that is similar to now, but again, there's levels to football, obviously, from college to the NFL. So he really just mentioned that his biggest task as a wide receiver to these two guys is just making it as easy as possible for them. Whoever is the quarterback, it's just to make it as easy as it is for him to get open and just catch passes from him. And if he does stay healthy compared to last year, because last year that was a big problem with the quarterbacks switching from Josh Dobbs to Nick Mullins, Kirk Cousins getting hurt, and then Justin Jefferson misses a lot of the season. If he stays healthy and is the kind of player that he's already proven to be, this Vikings team can be exciting. We'll see who the quarterback is and how far they get with either one of them, but things are looking different now. But with Justin Jefferson locked down for the foreseeable future, it can't be too bad for the Minnesota Vikings to have that. Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, they're exciting, but they just have to put it together and execute on the field. Justin Jefferson will be a big part of that, and whoever the quarterback is as well. But with that being said, we're going to head into the first break of the show, and when we return, we're going to talk some more about the quarterback battle in Las Vegas. Davante Adams chimes in, gives his input on if he has a preference over who starts and who he believes is leading that race up until now. We'll be right back with that topic. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to talk some more about a wide receiver, talking about two new quarterbacks that will be throwing him the ball this year. We just got finished talking about the Justin Jefferson and Minnesota Vikings quarterback situation. Now, very similar, Davante Adams, star wide receiver, having to catch passes from two potential new quarterbacks this year. And this one's a tighter battle. This one is actually going to be a quarterback competition, just based on all the reports. And just on both players, both Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell have very good cases to be the starting quarterback. If you look at Aiden O'Connell, he's been there. He was there last year, a 5-5 record after Jimmy Garoppolo went down. And you have that case in Aiden O'Connell. And then you have Gardner Minshew coming over from the Indianapolis Colts and putting on another solid season as this journeyman quarterback. Hasn't been with a team too long, but wherever he goes, it just seems like he produces and he understands the offenses that he's trying to lead out there, and I think that is also a very good reason for him to be the starting quarterback. I thought he would be the starting quarterback, but according to sources pretty close to the situation, it seems like Aiden O'Connell right now has the slight edge over Gardner Minshew just for that reason. He was there before. The level of comfortability with him is there, and according to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, he believed that Davante Adams' preference was Aiden O'Connell for those reasons. But big picture, talking about these two guys, one of them is going to be the quarterback going forward this year, but where is this quarterback situation going to be moving forward? Big picture, I don't think many people are too confident on the fact that one of them is going to be the quarterback for the next 4 to 5, 8 years or something like that. Las Vegas were actually one of the teams in the quarterback race this offseason in free agency, and really during the NFL draft. They were a little bit hindered by their draft position at 13. They were stuck not really being able to move and not having too much ammunition or too much valuables to move up in the draft, because it would have cost a lot. And I just felt they weren't in a good spot to trade away, I don't know, like a Devontae Adams or a Jacoby Myers or the next 2 or 3 first-round picks to move up to number 2 or something like that, like they were rumored to do for Jaden Daniels. I thought they had made the right choice by staying put, but now you enter a weird transition period, a period where you don't know how long these guys are going to be your starting quarterback, because you obviously want to get a little bit more talented there. But for the time being now, Devontae Adams was or is going to be an important part to this entire thing, to either these quarterbacks' success and just as an overall offense as well. He spoke on FS1's Speak on Tuesday to address the quarterback competition so far. He actually said he doesn't have a preference, but instead he just wants the quarterback that is the most confident out there, that when they are out there doesn't really blink in the face of adversity, and is just ready to go week in and week out. He wants the quarterback. Whoever can do that week in and week out, that's the one Devontae Adams wants to start. But he did mention and go a little bit more in depth on who he thinks is ahead right now in the quote-unquote race to be the starting quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders. And that's the part I did want to share with you guys when he said, I think right now, if I had to say, I think Aiden has the job because obviously he was here before and that's the way it was. He was running with the ones more until Garner comes in and takes the job away from him. I think it's Aiden's job right now. And Devontae Adams also mentioned that he was happy with what the Las Vegas Raiders did this offseason, obviously adding Brock Bowers as the biggest addition, bringing back some pieces on the offensive line, adding some pieces at the running back position as well. Here or there on defense, it's a little bit of a hit and miss, but overall, when you add a guy like Brock Bowers, that immediately increases your offensive production, your offensive variability, really, because now you have so many playmakers around whoever the quarterback is that I'm expecting it to look a little bit better, but you definitely do need the right quarterback in place to execute it and make it look right. And that's what they're going to do. I mentioned before in a video previously that their formation and their scheme is going to change a little bit, running more 2 tight end sets to get Michael Mayer out there, excuse me, not the fictional character, but get him out there, get Brock Bowers out there, obviously. Devontae's going to be out there. And the running backs, again, it is a questionable one, just because the names aren't too familiar with Zamir White, Amir Abdullah back there as well, and Alexander Madison. 3 guys that not a lot of people are too familiar with, other than maybe Alexander Madison, but he didn't have a great season as the starter. They're going to have more of a running back by committee approach, I would assume, but I think Zamir White impressed the most out of all 3 of them last year, so he may get the number 1 running back carries, more of a look for him, but I do expect it to be a collective effort generally for that group, so they have something going there with it, but again, finding who the right quarterback is will be huge. But it did bring me to this place where I found myself asking, with Devontae Adams getting him over to Las Vegas, a huge move for them to bring over a star, to really be the face of this organization in a time where they were going through head coaches. It wasn't looking great. They had Jimmy Garoppolo and Josh McDaniels, but then that blew up in their face. Now both of them are gone. You bring in a new quarterback, Antonio Pierce, now won over all of Las Vegas with how passionate he was and just how much he really cared about the team. But now you're 2 years into this 5-year, $141 million deal that you gave to Devontae Adams, and when you do bring in a player of this caliber that is pretty much in his prime, and getting closer to, the latter stage of his career rather than getting any younger, obviously, you do sort of have this window now where you don't want to throw this opportunity, to waste. You don't want to waste this opportunity basically with Davante, because it was a big surprise that it actually ended up happening, that he does come over. But now, like I mentioned, you want to take advantage of it as much as possible. And up until this point, they've had a lot of things like not go wrong, having to work out through their quarterbacks and just building up this roster to make it competitive. And it doesn't help that they're in a division with the Kansas City Chiefs in all reality. So that doesn't help. And then not only that, you have other teams in that division where realistically the Raiders could be better than right now, because the Chargers are in a full rebuild trying to get their new identity under Jim Harbaugh. The Broncos are even further back than the Chargers just because they just cleaned house. So now they're trying to figure out what this year's going to look like in general for them. So the Raiders have a real good chance here to at least be the second best team in this division and push the Kansas City Chiefs a little bit, because we saw how competitive at least one or both of those games were last year. So they have a good opportunity now where I think they did get better. But the question is now, how much pressure is on the Raiders to figure out this quarterback situation, because that seems to be like obviously the biggest issue during this time that they do have Davante Adams, because now they have about 3 years left on that 5-year deal that they gave him, and still they haven't really made too big of a progression towards being real competitors in the AFC or even in their own division. So I think now, heading into year 3 of this deal with Davante Adams, you're looking a little bit better. Antonio Pierce will be in his first year as a head coach, so the expectations will have to be monitored a little bit there. But overall, I think the pressure dial is starting to turn up a little bit more now, especially into this year and even more in the following year, because you have to figure out that quarterback spot. Because again, you have a generational type of receiver on your team. You don't want to just keep having 500 records, losing records, be out of the playoff race by November, October, or anything like that at worst case scenario. You surprised a lot of people last year, so where can you look to build off of that? I'm not saying that Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell are going to be complete busts, that you have no chance to do anything with them at all, but they're obviously not the long-term outlook for this team. They obviously want to look at that position and get better, more talented at that spot. So for right now, the pressure on the Raiders to do that, I think a lot of people can accept that this year they were in a tough spot. They didn't have too much to give up, to trade up, and also it wasn't looking great in free agency either for the quarterback market. So I think this year there is pressure to at least improve, but next year I think they have to address the quarterback spot, because by then, if you don't do it next year, you're heading into year 3, and if you don't address it next year, that'll be year 4, and then you only have 1 year left with Davante Adams to find a quarterback, and you don't expect it to go from where it is now into legitimate contenders in just Davante Adams' last year with the current contract that he is in right now. But luckily for them, next offseason is looking like a better quarterback market. If Dak Prescott, like I anticipate, it'll happen, he'll hit the free agent market. So the Raiders could have a great opportunity there to prime away from Dallas and make him their starting quarterback, if that all works out. I'm trying to think of other quarterbacks that could be on the market. I guess Tua, obviously, Jordan Love, technically, but they're not going to allow that to happen. So Tua, maybe Dak could be in that market for them to maybe get a look at and pry them away from their current teams if they're willing to offer more money than the Cowboys or the Dolphins right now. So luckily for them, this year the pressure is on a little bit more, but I don't think it's quite there yet. Next offseason, I do expect them to get one of those guys, get a major player in. I don't think they'll be in a better position in the draft to draft a quarterback. So I'm really looking at them next year in free agency to take advantage of Dak or Tua being on there and having that franchise guy to really connect with Davante Adams and take them to that next level, at least as a solidified number 2 team in the AFC West, because I believe they can get there. I like the pieces that they have around Adams and around the quarterbacks, Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer. You have Brock Bowers now, like I mentioned, Devontae Adams. Obviously, you have to take advantage of this window that you have now. And lucky for them, the market could be looking very enticing for them next year. So right now, not too great of expectations on the Raiders, but it is getting there. Hopefully it does get there. Hopefully there's not a lot of backlash on Antonio Pierce being this his first year. I believe he'll do great, but a lot of things could go wrong in the season with injuries and stuff like that. But I don't think it should be a make or break season just yet for the Las Vegas Raiders. But that is my opinion. Let me know what you guys think on the Raiders and their quarterback situation going forward. But in the meantime, we're going to move on to another break of the show. And on the flip side of that, we're going to talk about the Jaguars a little bit more and their second-year running back, Tank Bigsby. A lot of expectations are being put on his shoulders now heading into his second year by head coach Doug Peterson, and how he could be really the piece that unlocks this Jaguars offense and takes them to that next level to consistently take them through the regular season in 2024. I'll explain some more on why that is after the break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back here now on the show to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars some more. I've been pretty critical of them, but it could be looking more promising for them heading into 2024, and by an unfamiliar source, an unfamiliar hero that could step in for the Jaguars this year. That would be second-year running back Tank Bigsby. Last year, it was a struggle for Tank Bigsby. If you guys are unfamiliar with him, he was a draft pick last year by the Jacksonville Jaguars, and a lot of teams are switching over to this running back by committee, or at least a running back duo, to really get the best out of it. You see a lot of teams doing it now. The Rams are doing it, the Steelers are doing it, the Ravens. Having two running backs there to really emphasize this running game, to have a more balanced look. The Jaguars tried to do it last year, but it didn't really work out like I mentioned. Tank Bigsby only was limited to 50 carries, 132 yards, and only had 2 touchdowns in 2023. And to pile onto that, he fell into more of a reduced role in the second half of the year. And that's where the problems really started to arise for this Jacksonville Jaguars team, because once Tank Bigsby's role started to decrease as we headed later into the year, ETN obviously had to play more because of that, and he ended up getting hurt. And not only did he get hurt, but once he did get hurt, the offense really lost its identity, lost its North Star, if you would, and just didn't look the same after that without having a very reliable running game. An overdependence on ETN led to him getting hurt, and it just didn't look the same really from that point on. And because of that, head coach Doug Peterson has used that season now into this year as motivation, and has stressed to avoid a repeat of last year, to avoid Travis Etienne just getting hurt year in and year out. They need to get more out of Tank Bigsby in his second year going forward. To get, more production out of Travis Etienne, it means less wear and tear on the body of Travis Etienne as well. You get more production. if Tank Bigsby can take that second year leap and give you a little bit more than just a buck 32, 50 carries and 2 touchdowns. But why did Tank Bigsby struggle? Other than being a rookie and getting acclimated to everything, running backs coach Jerry Mack believed that the rookies, early struggles through getting accustomed to everything, training camp, just a longer season in general than he's ever had in his football career. He believed that his confidence was hurt early on, and then from then, it was tough to really regain it back with how fast the NFL season goes and just how intense everything is. It never really picked up for Tank Bigsby in his first year, and really the Jaguars were just moving so fast that not that he just couldn't keep up or wasn't capable of keeping up, but it's hard to regain that confidence when the team is so successful going forward. And if you're not playing a big role in that, the team's really not going to change anything. Obviously, if it's not broken, don't fix it. They're going to keep rolling with it. But they don't foresee an injury coming, obviously. And then once you get later into the year, your running back gets hurt, and now you don't have a backup plan because he hasn't been part of the main focus of this offensive scheme the entire year. So it never really all worked out for Tank Bigsby in his first year. But now, running backs coach Jerry Mack also emphasized that this year he has seen a revitalized type of attitude, in his words, from Tank Bigsby, and he anticipates him stepping into that role because he understands the offense a little bit more. Jerry Mack, the running backs coach, said a little bit more in depth that just a refocus. I think he understood last year, being new to the NFL, everything was extremely fast for him. I think now things are starting to slow down for him. He understands his role in this offense. He's understanding the ins and outs of this offense a lot better as well. And on top of the running game that you want to have, obviously, to make it a bit more balanced, which is going to be huge for the Jaguars, they've done a pretty decent job of replenishing the passing offense and getting back some talent after losing Calvin Ridley. You already had Christian Kirk in there. You already had Evan Ingram. And Calvin Ridley was the star player, the star wide receiver, the bona fide number one wide receiver that all contending teams need. But once you move on from him, I thought they did a good job at least of bringing in Gabe Davis, drafting Brian Thomas Jr., but there is still a little bit uncertainty there, but at least they just didn't sit on their hands and do nothing. So I like that they did something there, but the running game is really what needs to change of this team just going forward. Because if you look at their production last year, they finished 23rd in the NFL in rushing yards at 1,646, only averaging 96.8 yards per game, which if you're not over 100, I really don't consider this offense to be a championship contending level offense, because you need the running game to be better than that. You just do in this day and age. With everybody being good at passing, with everybody having all these passing weapons, you have to find something to differentiate you from the group. And the running game, if you have two very reliable backs, I think that could really be it for a lot of teams. But the Jaguars weren't in that conversation at all. And like I mentioned, once they had the total, I mentioned the total was 1,646. Travis Etienne recorded 1,008 yards for that rushing attack in 2023. So that means the rest was left to two guys, Trevor Lawrence and Tank Bigsby, really, as the next two leading rushers. But Tank Bigsby is the running back, and the next leading rusher in that attack was Trevor Lawrence, and that just can't be the case for the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you look at it here, I actually have it on here to show you guys. Travis Etienne clearly, far and away, was the leading rusher, was over-relied upon to carry this rushing attack, to at least produce something to give the Jaguars at least another dynamic of this offense. 11 touchdowns for him, 267 carries as well, and over 1,000 yards like I mentioned. But your next leading rusher, if you're at least a decent team in the running attack, you have the next leading rusher be at about 500 yards at least, maybe 600, 700 or something like that. But the next leading rusher only had 339 yards, and it was your quarterback. Like, That just can't be the case. If you really want to be considered legitimate contenders, 70 carries too for Trevor Lawrence as well. 250 carries for Tank Bigsby and 132 yards for Tank Bigsby as well. It's just backwards. Like, those numbers should be at least the other way around. And not only that, like I mentioned, they should be at least 500 to be considered average in this day and age. But because Trevor Lawrence also was running the ball so much, like you see there with 70 carries, he ended up getting hurt, and then really their playoff chances took a hit after that. So that's the one area of the Jacksonville Jaguars where I do understand that there might not be a number one wide receiver really at this point. If you consider Christian Kirk a number one or Gabe Davis a number one, I don't really, but maybe some people do. I think having a rusher, hopefully in Tank Bigsby, that can give you 500, 700 yards, 600 yards or something like that on 70 carries or numbers similar to that, produce 4 to 5 touchdowns, it would make this team look a lot different, I believe. And that way you can have Travis Etienne for the entirety of the regular season, because he hasn't really shown that he is injury prone or anything like that. He did suffer that injury last year, but other than that, it hasn't been too bad for him. He's already produced a 1,000-yard season, and it doesn't look like he has reached a ceiling or anything like that. Travis could definitely get better, and he can only really do that. I think he could only really unlock that if you have another guy supporting him, and hopefully Tank Bigsby takes that second leap now heading into 2024. And if he does that without a number one wide receiver, like I mentioned, I think it would take off a little bit more pressure on Trevor Lawrence if they have two monsters in the backfield, because now you don't really have to pass too often if your guys aren't getting open, or if they're taking a little bit longer to get acclimated to this offense or get acclimated to just being that number one guy. You have two reliable backs back there that you can hand the ball off to continuously, give one guy a break, bring the other guy in, and that way the defense is left guessing a little bit more, and you don't have to put too much pressure on Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, or Evan Ingram, or even Brian Thomas, because they've never really been the number one wide receivers on a team, other than Christian Kirk, I guess, maybe in Arizona for some time. But even then, Gabe Davis hasn't really been that number one target. Evan Ingram, not really either, with his time with the Giants or the Jaguars. So I think overall, it seems like a lot of pressure on Tank Bigsby to just be good, and that way the Jaguars will be better. But I do understand he's young. I do understand that he's coming off of a pretty down year as a rookie. You could say it could be as expected, but the Jaguars have a lot of confidence at the best out of him. Hopefully keep him healthy as well throughout the entirety of 2024. And if they could do that, I'd like the Jaguars' chances a little bit more. I've been one of the people that have put a lot of pressure on them, or have said that there is some more pressure on them now. But if they're able to take off some of that off of Trevor's shoulders with being one of the highest paid quarterbacks, not having to go out there and prove it, just win games through the running game, I think it'll be a massive weight off of his shoulders. And the Jaguars could look a little bit more well-balanced, and maybe not give up leads, not give up losing streaks towards the end of the year if their running attack is reliable throughout the entirety of the season. That's where I see it. Projecting Tank Bigsby's numbers, it's hard to say right now, but it's hard to play worse, honestly. So hopefully they give him the ball a little bit more, and he's a big factor going forward for the Jaguars there. But that'll be all on that segment. We're going to head into our next break of the show. Two more topics to talk about on today's episode. One, in regards to the Houston Texans. They made a lot of additions this year, but which one was the most significant? I have two: Danielle Hunter or Stephon Diggs. Two experienced players, two players that are expected to contribute right away. Which one of them was the more significant addition to this team? And also, the other segment will be talking about Dak Prescott, addressing being seen in a walking boot. What did he say about having a potential injury? Is it something, or is it nothing? Are too many people reading into it? All of that is coming up in just a few seconds. Don't go anywhere.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here now on the show, talking about another AFC South team in the Houston Texans, this time on two additions that they made this offseason, other than the fact that they, just got exponentially better with almost all of their additions, with Azeez Al-Shaair, Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs, and Danielle Hunter are the biggest ones that really are expected to make the difference. But which one is more significant? I'm leaning towards the more defensive side of the ball. And I wanted to explain why. I wanted to explain why based off of what I think, but also what their young star pass rusher, Will Anderson, had to say about Danielle Hunter being added to this team, to this defense, because the Houston Texans already found a gem, or not really found a gem. They drafted Will Anderson with the second pick of the draft, but having him actually on their team as a rookie, he won the Defensive Rookie of the Year award. And not only that, he was third in the NFL in pass rush win rate at 26% and had the third most quarterback pressures by a rookie over the last 5 seasons with 59. So on top of that, he also recorded 7 sacks last year, which are pretty impressive as a rookie, and being part of a duo with Jonathan Grenard and himself. Jonathan Grenard obviously had a better year just based off of numbers, had better numbers than Will Anderson, but he's been in the league a little bit longer than him. He hit free agency this year, and he moved on to Danielle Hunter's old team in the Minnesota Vikings. So Danielle Hunter joining the Houston Texans, they essentially just switched teams, and now he's forming a new partnership here with Will Anderson. But on that deal, Danielle Hunter signed a 2-year, $49 million contract, $48 million guaranteed. So, a congratulations to Danielle Hunter for getting so much out of that deal. And it just, does more for what they expect out of Danielle Hunter this year. If you're going to guarantee him that much money over the next 2 years, you're really buying into the fact that he's going to produce as he has produced for the Minnesota Vikings over the last 5 to 4 years, because he recorded 16.5 sacks last year, which was 5th in the NFL. For the Minnesota Vikings. And apart from the high praise that Danielle Hunter has already received from Will Anderson based off his experience, his character, he spoke on what it could look like this season for both of them from the opposing offense's point of view. This is Will Anderson. He said, teams are going to have to decide. That's a double-digit sack guy every year. Teams are going to be like, shoot, we have to double this guy, but I don't know about this other guy. Talking about himself, obviously. It's going to be fun this year playing with him. And having both of them on either side is just going to be such a massive advantage right away, because not a lot of teams have that dynamic duo. They're not really in the prime of their careers. I don't think Will Anderson is there just yet, obviously, but Danielle Hunter clearly is. Right in the middle of his prime. So having both of them, having an ascending pass rusher now be combined with a more experienced and already successful one is one of the best things you could have. I'm just talking from experience, from seeing the Steelers play and seeing an experienced guy like TJ Watt, an experienced and successful guy like TJ was, to then draft Alex Highsmith. Not only does it take the pressure off a Highsmith to not have to produce right away, but once he does sort of turn that corner, once he does sort of start to produce on his own, then it's a real nightmare, because you have to double TJ, you have to double Danielle Hunter, but Alex and Will Anderson are starting to get to a point where you're going to have to almost start to double them, or they're going to just go off the entire game. So it's a massive advantage to have. Like I mentioned, Will Anderson recorded 7 sacks last year, but Danielle Hunter has obtained 5 double-digit sack seasons which is the fourth most in the NFL since 2015. So you have a very successful, consistent pass rusher in Danielle Hunter, which is something that I think this defense needed once Jonathan Grenard moved on, and then just based off of last year where they were very successful. They surprised a lot of people for getting where they did, to losing to the Baltimore Ravens in the divisional round as a young team, again, surprising a lot of people. So now bringing some more consistency, some more experience to that side of the ball is why I believe, going back to the question, which one is the most significant addition, I would have to go with Danielle Hunter because, one, it'll emphatically help out Will Anderson, which is the long-term plan, right? He is one of the faces of this franchise. Going beyond those 2 years that you gave to Danielle Hunter, you expect Will Anderson to be here for the next at least 8 to 9 years or something like that. Sort of similar to a J.J. Watt, having that established anchor on your defensive line and being the face of this franchise going forward. That's sort of what they envision with Will Anderson. So you bring in a guy like Danielle Hunter where he can learn a lot of tricks and a lot of just small advantages, small details based on technique and all those sort of things, little nuances. Is going to help so much in helping Will Anderson get to that next level. And not only doing that, but doing it at an advanced rate now that you have someone like Danielle Hunter in there to help him with that. And it's similar with what you get out of Stefon Diggs, right? Because Stefon is an experienced guy, established as one of the best route runners and just overall wide receivers in this league. You can get the same benefit out of him on a one-year deal to sprinkle a little bit of knowledge to Nico Collins, to Tank Dell, who is only heading into his second year. After looking so good, and now you have Stefon Diggs in his ear, giving him advice, giving him some pointers on how to attack corners, how to line himself off, how to line himself up, how to play off of leverage and things like that. It's priceless what they're getting out of Stefon Diggs and out of Danielle Hunter for their young superstars, which is why in my offseason grades, I gave them an A+. I'm pretty sure they were the only team to get an A+, because of additions like this, not only helping out right now, but helping out their young talent going forward into the future. With such an exciting team, you bring in experienced guys like this. But where the difference starts to show up with Stefon and Danielle, I think it's just the fact that you didn't really need Stefon. And it's weird to say that because when you have the opportunity to add Stefon Diggs, you don't, right after say you didn't really need him. The Texans are glad to have him. Obviously, it helps their team tremendously, but I thought they were a little bit more lagging on that defensive side of the ball, especially like I mentioned with Jonathan Grenard moving on in free agency. That happened before Danielle Hunter, obviously signed with the Texans. So once you lose Jonathan Grenard, that's a big hole that you have to fill, and bringing in Danielle Hunter pretty much fills it, and if not, maybe increases it a little bit just because he has more experience and more consistency than Jonathan Grenard. Then you look at the offensive side of the ball. I say you don't really need it just because Nico Collins had a great year last year. Tank Dell was on his way to being a 1,000-yard receiver just in his first year if he didn't suffer that, I think he might have fractured his ankle or did something like that to just end his season. He was on his way to being a 1,000-yard receiver. Put that together with Nico Collins. Then you still have Mechie, their young wide receiver who hasn't really stepped up just yet for other reasons outside of just playing. He is still there as well. You have Dalton Schultz coming back. They were able to re-sign him in free agency. And C.J. Stroud, other than the fact that you have all these weapons, he is that difference-making quarterback that a lot of teams really want to have on their team. The Texans are very fortunate that they were able to get CJ and have him progress to a level where he's already being considered in those MVP talks, in those, top tier level quarterback conversations with Josh, with Lamar, with Patrick and things like that. I think people are already seeing that talent out of him. So you didn't really need Stefon, I believe, to step into that level. I believe they probably could have been fine with running it back with Nico and Tank and Mechie, but you don't really pass up a chance like this to add Stefon Diggs. Even on a one-year deal, it doesn't really do too much, but I believe that the holes on defense were a little bit greater. You needed to improve on that side of the ball a little bit more than last year because I believe that the Ravens sort of exposed them from that point in the second half of that game. If you remember, they just had their way offensively after a while. It was close in the first half, but then the Ravens offense really started clicking, and I thought the Texans could have used some more pass rush, could have used some more game-changing players on that side of the ball. So that's really where I'm coming from in this. I thought the defense was lacking a little bit. Their corners were as well. They haven't really addressed that yet, but I'm glad they added another pass rusher to at least replace Jonathan Grenard. So having that partner right alongside Will Anderson, I think it's going to do wonders for them. I really do. Will Anderson, can't stop praising him, can't stop talking about how much he's helped them already. And it's just another reason why I think the Texans are going to have that type of year where they made it to the divisional round last year. And now this year, I wouldn't be surprised if they made it to the conference championship. I say that with all sincerity. I really believe they could get there. They have to get through the Bengals, the Ravens, obviously. The Chiefs will be in there. Maybe the Dolphins could be in there as well. The Browns, maybe, if Deshaun Watson can produce as well. So you have a lot of great teams, but I think the Texans, with how much better they got, I'm expecting a conference championship. I'm buying into it that much already. But, yeah, Danielle Hunter, I think he's done enough. I think he is just more significant to this team right now to make more of a difference than Stephon Diggs for those reasons. But as always, let me know what you guys think. Who is a more significant addition? Or maybe you don't think it's any of these two guys. Maybe you think it's Joe Mixon or someone like that. Let me know in the comment section. But we have one more topic to talk about briefly here. Dak Prescott, why the heck was he wearing a walking boot on vacation? We're going to get to what he said about it and whether or not we have to be concerned about it now going forward in such a massive year for the Dallas Cowboys. So stick around. We're going to talk some more about Dak Prescott after this break. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, and we had to talk about it. I had to bring it up on providing some sort of explanation from Dak on why there are pictures of him wearing that walking boot on vacation. Completely random, something that I didn't expect to see because it's not like it was an injury that was reported or anything, a mild thing that he suffered through OTAs or mandatory minicamp. It was just complete random day. Oh, there's a picture of Dak wearing a boot now. You know, alarms going off in Dallas of why that was going on. Because from my knowledge, I've never seen him wear that ever. Just as a precaution, which leads right into Dak's explanation, because he provided that explanation for wearing the walking boot last week. And clearly, it got a lot of people concerned, a few people concerned when it blew up social media that he was pictured with that walking boot. And in his explanation, he basically started off by saying that he was just basically getting a little bit older. So after a few tough practices, it usually got sore. And because it is that same ankle that he snapped 4 years ago, he was sort of getting into the idea that he wears it as a precautionary reason rather than a new injury popping up with that same ankle that he did injure 4 years ago. But more specifically on his statement, he said, then you're going on a fishing trip and you want to protect it and make sure things don't get worse. Literally, it is absolutely nothing. People are reaching, trying to make things that they aren't. I'm getting older. I have to take care of my body. I have to be smart. And if I can take precautions and lessen something by putting on a boot, I'm going to do that, or I'm going to do it. And he didn't mention anything about this being potentially serious or anything like that. There were reports that he did suffer a mild foot sprain, so that was the reason that he wore it, but he really didn't mention anything about that, or he didn't say anything that it was that new injury, like I said, or any mild foot sprain or anything like that. So Dak really just wanted to clear the air and tell everyone that, like he said, it was absolutely nothing. People have nothing to worry about with him wearing a walking boot. He just does it as a precautionary reason. And after that, days after that first picture, he posted another picture that that showed him on vacation again without the walking boot, and just really getting everybody to calm down about this situation. So it seems like, at least from what he's saying, that nothing is really going on there. And that is a sigh of relief, but I will get into more of it in just a few seconds. But it is a sigh of relief because he is heading into a massive year, obviously this year, with the expectations, as always, on the Cowboys, but with him in general, having to play potentially on the last year of his contract with the Cowboys. If it is the last year, he wants to play as good as possible, just so if he does move on, he has that on his resume. He has that on tape to show other teams that he is worth $54, $56, $55 million if they were to pay him that next year with a new team. So this ankle injury could be a cause for concern potentially if it does start to pop up again. And that's where I wanted to go with this segment, because is it a concern for me that he wore it? It was at first, like I mentioned, because it was completely random, just out of nowhere. Why is he wearing a boot? Why do you have to worry about that now? As if things needed to get worse for Dallas Cowboys fans. But he says it's nothing to worry about. But in that same breath, if this injury, it was very bad what happened to him in 2020 when he suffered that injury. He was on his way to a great year, and I would know because he was my fantasy quarterback, and they snapped his ankle, and then it was all ruined. It was all ruined for Dak and for my fantasy hopes. But that was 4 years ago, and like I mentioned before, I've never seen him wear that just as a precaution, and it has never popped up, because if it was to pop up, everybody would see it, and I've never seen it other than now. So for him to wear it now, after a few tough practices, it just makes me think now this year, where you really can't afford to have anything go wrong in a contract year, and after a few tough practices, if you need it as a precaution, or if it's feeling a little sore, what's going to happen when maybe you get rolled up on during a game? What happens after a few tough games? Not tough practices, but just a tough run of games during the regular season where you're asked to do more because this offense is a little bit depleted. It isn't as high-powered as it once was. You're asked to do more, and maybe in the process of doing that, you're putting more stress on yourself. You're doing a little bit more physically. How's that ankle going to feel? And is it going to stand up? If this injury happened 4 years ago and you're still wearing this as a precaution because it is starting to feel a little bit sore now, you still have to do things like this to protect it. I worry going into this year now that maybe in a scenario, there's a lot of pressure going into this year. Dak obviously feels it. He tries to do a little bit too much one game. Maybe does, or maybe tries to extend for a first down. Maybe he tries to run it out a little bit more, and he gets hit the wrong way. Like I mentioned, he gets rolled up on, and that ankle starts to swell up, and now you're in a weird spot where it starts to get even worse over the course of the season if you don't treat it right away. And Dak is really the one piece of this offense that can give you confidence. With CeeDee, if he's there, he's obviously going to be that bona fide number one wide receiver. But I have my doubts over whether or not he will be there because of this contract situation. People like Dak, people within the organization probably expect him to be there, but I'm starting to get my doubts over that. So Dak's really the one main piece that you can't lose Dak in this offense, because as good as they're going to be with Dak at their quarterback position, if you take away that, then really you have no compass, you have no point of just reference to go off of. If you lose Dak, you have to start maybe Cooper Rush or Trey Lance, whoever is the backup quarterback at that point, and then really this season gets turned on its head if Dak gets hurt because of something so minor like this. And I mean minor just in the way that he said it. I just worry it could grow to be something else if over a couple of tough practice days he has to be wearing a walking boot and it's getting a little bit sore. I worry that during the regular season something could go wrong for the Cowboys with their star quarterback, and especially for him in a contract year, that's the last thing you want, to get injured again, especially re-injuring an ankle that was very severely injured 4 years ago. It's something that you hopefully it doesn't happen to Dak, but it is something to think about. I truly believe that with his situation going forward. But in terms of his contract and being on that contract year, he did touch on that a little bit more, and I'll sprinkle that in here before I close it out. He commented that the conversations and negotiations are back and forth right now, that they're ongoing, but he isn't really worried about that. He has let his agent really focus in on just handling all of it. And he had that quote recently that he said he's not focused on it and he's just going to let the money work itself out like it always does. So it seems like he's feeling confident about it. It's looking and it's taking a lot longer than I'm sure a lot of people had hoped for, but it seems like they're working out something based on the money right now. With the finances, it always takes a little bit longer. So hopefully for the Cowboys, it gets done before training camp, and then they can move on to CeeDee Lamb as well, because I think those two have to stay together in Dallas. Do I believe it's going to happen? I probably would say no. I think with Dak, it looks positive right now that they're ongoing, but I seriously have my doubts about it. But that's what he claims it to be as. That's where the situation stands with his walking boot situation and the contract negotiations. But let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think I'm maybe reading too much into him wearing a walking boot? Do you share the same concerns that I do? Leave it in the comments section of this video. But that will wrap it up for us on today's show. I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. If you want to see more of this show, check out both YouTube channels, the GSMC Sports and the GSMC Podcast Network channel on YouTube, for a variety of different ways to watch NFL stories on YouTube Shorts, on individual segment videos, or all the live full shows on both channels. As a final reminder, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more NFL topics and discussions with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thank you again for joining me, and I'll see you guys back here again tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn.